Right, guys, next one. So this is getting into chapter three. Um, everything on the screen is kind of what's already been covered. So now we're going to have a look at changes in farming and further settlement. We've been through basically all the wars, so we're kind of aware of what is happening in terms of that pushback against the Plains Indians. Now we're looking at how the whites changed farming methods to be more successful and how that led to further settlement. Just to recap, the initial problem with homesteading, homesteaders needed savings between $800 and $1,000 for plowing fields, digging wells, buying a horse and farm and equipment, and building a homestead. And they could quickly run out of money if their crops failed. Um, Now, the railroads, so homesteaders could now visit relations more easily, making it less isolated, and homesteaders could order new products, which, they were transported by rail. Towns started springing up more quickly. So the railroads are so important to this as well. When you're revising, guys, think about the big topics and how they connect to pretty much any question you could be faced with. So the impact. You need to know this for the new farming methods. You've got dry farming, a method designed to conserve water, basically trapping rainwater under the surface, which allowed strong root growth in crops, which meant they could access more water and survive. So it worked well with wheat developing in the later periods. So this is 80s to the 90s. You got the wind pumps. So farmers had previously kind of given up on their claims due to the problems with reaching water. We saw that with the original wells. They were hard work, but now the wind pumps, really brought in by Daniel Halliday, 1854. He developed it that swung around automatically as the wind changed direction, and these pumps enabled farmers to reach the water far easier, far deeper. The old windmills were, they struggled to stand up to stormy, the stormy weather on the plains, but these ones, the metal pumps, they were stronger and they only had to be oiled once a year. So, in terms of looking after them, they were it's far easier. So, wind pumps are a fantastic one. You've got barbed wire. So introduced in 1874, a cheap and easy way to fence off your lands because timber was scarce. Mechanization. So these were the new machines. The sulky plow, for example, 50,000 sulky plows were sold in the first 6 years of production. Basically, it was pulled from behind a horse. There's an image of one there, and it basically allowed you to break up the hard mud to be able to plant seeds easy and give the depth for it as well, and that also be able to plant for you. So you would allow things like the seed drill to work as well. Right, those four things for the new methods. Any question on farming methods, really look at mechanization, wind pumps, barbed wire, and dry farming. Now, going into kind of ranching, there was a big problem of overstocking. We've had the beef bonanza in the 70s, these cattle barons, and now quite simply there's too many cattle. They're overgrazing, so there's not enough grass now because the cattle are just eating them all. And when you've got too much of one thing, there's too much in the market, floods the market, the prices drop. So that means there's less profits for the ranchers, and the ranchers didn't want to sell them on the cheap, so they kind of didn't sell them. They just went to waste. And then the winter hits, the winter of 86, 87, where, so many cattle die, especially on the big ranches, and they go bankrupt. So, I'm going to recap what I just said there. So beef now too plentiful, shows lowered their prices to sell meat. So basically, the ranchers would have to lower their prices to actually sell it. Prices paid for cattle fell. 1882, profits from selling cattle were falling. So this is where the ranchers holded on to their cattle to hoping that the prices would rise. Soil erosion. So this is part of the overstocking I just mentioned. The soil was damaged with this overgrazing. The grass covered would be rapidly reduced, and prairie fires worsen the problem. And then the Great Die-Up, which is 86, 87. So the winter of 86, 87, that is the Great Die-Up, and that's because the weakened cattle from the overstocking, they couldn't reach the grass in the deep snow, and 15% of the herds perished, and a lot of cattlemen went bankrupt from it. Stock that survived were in terrible condition. Prices sank further. The open range was seen to be more of a problem because it was just too big. It was too open, and cowboys had to travel far. We looked in the problems of cowboys and the ranges. They had to travel far to try to look out for these cows, allow them to reach the grass and the water. In this great winter, the cattle just couldn't do it, and they died, and the cowboys struggled to actually get all the cows in, whereas the smaller ranches became more of the model because they were closed off, and this was the closed range. It was fenced off, so you could keep the cattle, where you knew where they were, and you could easily collect them. So again, closed range, smaller herds, easily found, easier to provide water during the drought, easier to guard against rustling, reduced beef supply, focus on higher quality beef for higher prices and profit. Pure-blooded breeds of cow, like the Herefords and the Holsteins, were introduced. So that covers everything on the closed range, and closure of the open range. So the winter really does this, effectively ends it. Cowboys now basically just working on if you watch Yellowstone on Netflix, basically that's what cowboys are now. Lived in bunkhouses, followed the rules of the farm, patrol the boundaries, go to the spring roundup to get the calves. So other settlement, you've got the Exoduster movement, great one for migration, and another thing that was impacted by the Civil War. Yes, it's about 14 years after the Civil War. However, it's still ex-slaves who now don't have a master and want to move. So they want to move westwards. So the causes, again, this is going to have a look at the Civil War, leaving ex-slaves in the South who do not want to work for their farms. They don't want to work for their ex-masters because the ex-masters are racist. There's about 4 million of them in total. A lot of whites in the South, they refuse to accept this liberation. They refuse to accept these ex-slaves as now freed people. So some actually tried to keep them from becoming independent by doing something called sharecropping. Now, sharecropping was when a landowner allows your tenant to use some of the land in return for a share of the crops they grow. And this kind of kept black Americans working on white farms. Now, because of this oppression, some black Americans wanted to move west and just get away from it and take up the Homestead Act claims. Benjamin Singleton is the guy for this. He pioneered the move to Kansas. He set up a settlement there in '73. He promoted the journey to Kansas at meetings in newspapers and helped hundreds of black Americans move there. And this would lead to the Exodus in 1879. So, by the way, the Exoduster movement, while it's a great one to explain migration, settlement, etc., it could easily be a narrative. So that's why I'm setting it up as cause, event, and consequence. So if you're watching this, have that in mind as well, that this could be a story, this could be a narrative of the events of the Exoduster movement. Okay. A rumour spread in 1879 that the federal government had given the whole of Kansas to ex-slaves to settle. This was not true, but it led to a huge number of slaves making the journey. 400,000 set off in 1879. This is called the Exoduster movement. Now you've got Henry Adams, who's promoting the idea of this black emigration, and many wanted to move just for new jobs. Kansas had a reputation as an anti-slavery state. The Homestead Act promised land, and there was this whole biblical story of Exodus, led migrants to believe, right, God was going to provide for them and help them escape from oppression. But as a consequence, so the ending of this, by 1880, you've got 43,000 black Americans in Kansas. Now, other settlers had already taken the best land, and the Exodusters were kind of left in the uplands, which was difficult to farm, so they did need help. Many kind of believed the land would be free and could not afford the claims and charities, struggled to kind of organize help. Many contracted yellow fever on the journey and were very ill. The governor of Kansas actually set up HELP, which organized colonies for them to live in and temporary fund to help them get started. But a lot of white Americans opposed this in the South. They believed they should not be, the white Americans should be helped, not the black Americans. And white settlers in Kansas also believed they should be helped, not the Exodusters. So there was a bit of racial pushback. And the reality in the South and the migration west decreased in the 1880s. The Exoduster migrants remained quite poor as they had travelled with little savings and planning, but they were still probably better off than they were in the South. So that's kind of the story of the Exoduster movement. It covers everything that you kind of need in there. So just kind of, if you're faced with a narrative, think of the way we've set this up in 3 separate